The security guard wouldn't even look me in the eye as he watched me pack my coffee mug into a cardboard box. 29 years, 10,585 days of walking through those glass doors. And now, 4 days before my 60th birthday, 4 days before I could finally retire with full benefits, they were throwing me out like yesterday's trash. But here's what Wilson, my new boss, didn't know. Here's what none of them knew as they smiled their fake smiles and talked about budget cuts and new directions. I had been counting. Every single day, every sick leave I never took, every weekend I came in during emergencies, every new employee I trained when they were too cheap to hire proper trainers. And the numbers didn't add up. My name is Jones Miller. I'm 60 years old, and I've worked at Crestwood Technologies since I was 31. I know every pipe in this building, every computer system, every safety protocol. I know which coffee machine breaks down every Tuesday and which elevator makes that weird noise on the 3rd floor. More importantly, I know how to read a contract, and I know how to count. Let me take you back to where this nightmare started. It was a Monday morning 3 weeks ago. I was sitting at my desk in the maintenance department, going through work orders like I did every morning for almost 3 decades. The coffee was still hot. The building was quiet, except for the hum of computers starting up. That's when Wilson walked in. Marcus Wilson was 35 years old, fresh from business school, wearing a suit that cost more than I made in a month. He had been hired as the new operations director 2 months earlier. The kind of guy who used words like synergy and optimization in every sentence. "Jones," he said, not even bothering with good morning. "We need to talk." I looked up from my paperwork. In 29 years, I had seen a lot of new managers come and go. Most of them tried to make big changes in their first few months to prove they were worth their salary. But something about Wilson felt different. Dangerous. "What can I do for you, Mr. Wilson?" He sat on the edge of my desk, pushing aside a photo of my wife, Sarah, and our grandkids. "I've been looking at the numbers, Jones. Your department is expensive." "Expensive how?" "Your salary, for starters. You're making almost as much as some of our engineers, plus with your pension benefits coming up." He shrugged like he was talking about the weather. "It doesn't make financial sense." My hands went cold. "I've been here 29 years. I've earned every penny of that salary." "I'm sure you have. But we're moving in a leaner direction. We need younger people who can adapt to new technologies." "I adapt just fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I learned every new system you've installed. I trained half the people in this building." Wilson stood up, straightening his tie. "The decision's already been made, Jones. We're letting you go at the end of the month." The room started spinning. "At the end of the month? But my retirement benefits kick in next week. I turn 60 on Friday." "I know. I'm sorry about the timing." But he wasn't sorry. I could see it in his eyes. He was pleased, proud even. That night I sat at my kitchen table with Sarah, staring at the termination letter Wilson had given me. The words blurred together. Budget constraints. New direction. Services no longer required. 29 years, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "How can they just throw you away like that?" I didn't answer because I didn't know, but I kept staring at that letter. And something bothered me. Something about the dates. The next morning, I went to the HR department. Betty, the HR manager, had been there almost as long as me. She was one of the good ones, the kind who remembered your kids' names and asked about your family. "Betty," I said, "I need to see my employment file." She looked uncomfortable. "Jones, I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry." "Just show me the file, please." She pulled out a thick folder with my name on it. As I flipped through the pages, my heart started racing. According to their records, my start date was February 15th, 1995. But I remembered clearly. I started on January 12th, 1995. I remembered because it was 3 days after Sarah's birthday, and she had joked that her birthday present was me finally getting a good job. "Betty, this start date is wrong." She leaned over to look. "Are you sure?" "I'm positive. I started January 12th, not February 15th. That's more than a month difference." Her face went pale. "Jones, if you started in January, that means I hit my 29 years last month. My pension benefits should have kicked in already." Betty was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Jones, you're not the first person this has happened to." That afternoon I drove home in a daze. Sarah was in the garden, planting flowers for spring. She looked up when she heard my car, and I could see the worry in her eyes. "What did you find out?" I told her everything. About the wrong date, about what Betty had said, about how they were trying to cheat me out of my pension. Sarah set down her gardening gloves and looked at me with fire in her eyes. "They're not getting away with this?" That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the years I had given to that company, all the nights I stayed late to fix broken equipment, all the times I came in during snowstorms because someone had to keep the building running, all the young employees I had trained, treated like my own kids, watched grow up and move on to better jobs. And they were trying to steal it all from me. The next day, I did something I had never done before. I called in sick. Not because I was actually sick, but because I needed time to think, time to plan. I went to the public library and spent hours reading about employment law, about pension fraud, about what companies could and couldn't do to their employees. What I found made me angry, really angry. There were stories everywhere. Companies firing people right before their pensions kicked in, changing contract dates, losing paperwork, all to save money on benefits they had promised to pay. But there were also stories about people who fought back, people who sued, people who won. That's when I remembered Jane. Jane Roberts had worked in HR at Crestwood for 15 years before she quit 2 years ago. She had trained Betty, actually. Jane was smart, tough, and she knew where all the bodies were buried, so to speak. I found her number in my old phone and called her that evening. "Jones," she said, sounding genuinely happy to hear from me. "How are you doing?" "Not good, Jane. I need to talk to you about something important." I told her everything, about Wilson, about the wrong start date, about what Betty had said. Jane was quiet for a long time. Then she said words that changed everything. "Jones, what they're doing is illegal. It's fraud. And I think I know how to prove it." We met at a coffee shop the next morning. Jane looked older, more tired, but her eyes were still sharp. "I quit Crestwood because of stuff like this," she said. "Wilson wasn't the first manager to try these tricks, but he's the worst I've ever seen." "What do you mean?" Jane pulled out a notebook. "Before I left, I started keeping records. Employees who were fired right before retirement, contract dates that mysteriously changed, benefits that were suddenly unavailable due to technicalities." She flipped through pages of names and dates. My stomach dropped as I recognized some of them. Good people, hard workers. All of them let go right before they could retire. "This is bigger than just you, Jones. This is a pattern. A systematic way of cheating older employees out of their benefits." "But how do we prove it?" Jane smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "We're going to need help. Professional help. I know a lawyer who specializes in this kind of case. But more importantly, I know someone at the Department of Labor who's been looking for a case exactly like this." My hands were shaking as I drove home that day. Not from fear, but from something else. Something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. That evening, Sarah and I sat on our porch, watching the sunset. We had done this almost every night for 30 years. It was our time to talk, to plan, to dream about the future. "What happens next?" she asked. "We fight," I said. "We fight for every day I worked, for every promise they made, for every other person they've cheated." Sarah reached over and took my hand. "Good. Because I'm tired of watching them push good people around." The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Jane had given me the name of a lawyer, David Chen, who specialized in employment fraud. She had also given me homework. "Document everything," she had said. "Every day you worked, every promise they made, every conversation you had, every email, everything." I spent the morning going through 30 years of paperwork. Pay stubs, performance reviews, training certificates, emergency call-out records. I had kept everything, stored neatly in boxes in our basement. Sarah helped me organize it all on our dining room table. As we worked, patterns emerged. Clear evidence of my start date, proof of my perfect attendance record, documentation of all the extra work I'd done over the years. "Look at this," Sarah said, holding up a letter from 1998. It was from the old CEO, thanking me personally for coming in during a weekend emergency that saved the company thousands of dollars. "They called you a valuable and irreplaceable employee." "Apparently not irreplaceable enough," I said bitterly. "Don't say that. Look at all this evidence, Jones. Look at everything you've accomplished. They can't just erase 29 years of dedication." That afternoon, I called David Chen's office. His secretary scheduled an appointment for the next day. David Chen was younger than I expected, maybe 40, but he had kind eyes and a firm handshake. His office was small but organized, with law books lining every wall. "Jane told me about your situation," he said, after I explained everything. "What Crestwood is doing is not just unethical, it's criminal." "Criminal?" "Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud. If we can prove they systematically changed employment records to deny benefits, Wilson and his accomplices could face serious prison time." My heart started racing. "How do we prove it?" David leaned forward. "That's the tricky part. We need to show a pattern. Individual cases are hard to win because companies can claim they were honest mistakes. But if we can prove they did this to multiple employees, Jane has records of other cases. That's a start. But we need more. We need internal documents, emails, memos, evidence that shows this was planned." I felt deflated. "How are we supposed to get that kind of evidence?" David smiled. "Let me make some calls. There are government agencies that take this kind of fraud very seriously, especially when it involves pension benefits." I left his office feeling overwhelmed but determined. This was bigger than just my job. This was about justice. That evening I got a call from Jane. "Jones, I've been thinking about our conversation. There's something else you should know." "What?" "Remember how I said I quit because of stuff like this? Well, I didn't just quit. I reported what I saw to the Department of Labor before I left." My grip tightened on the phone. "What did they say?" "They opened an investigation, but they needed more evidence, more victims willing to come forward. Jones, your case might be exactly what they've been waiting for." The next few days were a whirlwind. David Chen contacted the Department of Labor investigator Jane had worked with, a woman named Agent Maria Santos. Agent Santos was very interested in my case. "Mr. Miller," she said during our first phone call, "your situation fits perfectly with a pattern we've been tracking at Crestwood Technologies, but we need your help to build a solid case." "What kind of help?" "We need you to go back to work." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "Don't quit. Don't resign. Make them fire you officially. And while you're still there, document everything. Every conversation with Wilson, every interaction with HR. Everything." The thought of going back there, of facing Wilson knowing what I knew, made me sick. But I understood why it was necessary. "Will you do it?" Agent Santos asked. I looked at Sarah, who was listening to every word. She nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "I'll do it." The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. Going to work every morning, fixing broken equipment, training new employees, all while knowing I was gathering evidence that could send my boss to prison. Wilson seemed to enjoy watching me squirm. He would walk by my desk and smile, make comments about enjoying my last few weeks, ask if I had started looking for a new job. If only he knew. I started keeping a detailed journal of every interaction. I also discovered something interesting about the new computer system they had installed 6 months earlier. As the senior maintenance technician, I had access to system backups that most people didn't even know existed, including email backups. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, I accessed the backup files. What I found made my hands shake with anger. Emails between Wilson and Betty, discussing my pension problem, messages about adjusting employment records for several older employees, conversations about how much money they could save by restructuring the workforce. But the most damning email was from Wilson to someone at corporate headquarters. "The Miller situation is handled. Record adjustment complete. Estimated savings, $847,000 over projected pension lifetime." They had put a price on stealing my life's work. $847,000. I printed everything, made copies, stored them in multiple locations. The next morning, I called Agent Santos. "I found it," I said. "All of it." And that's when everything changed. 2 days after I handed over those emails to Agent Santos, I was sitting at my desk trying to act normal when I heard commotion in the hallway. Through my office door, I could see men in dark suits walking toward Wilson's corner office. Federal agents. They were here. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. After 30 years of following rules and keeping quiet, I was about to watch my boss get arrested. And I was the one who made it happen. Wilson's door was closed, but I could hear raised voices. Other employees were gathering in the hallway, whispering. Betty from HR looked pale as she hurried past my door. Then Wilson's door opened, and I saw something I'll never forget. Wilson, the man who had smiled while trying to steal my pension, was being led out in handcuffs. His face was red, his expensive suit wrinkled, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked scared. As they walked past my door, Wilson's eyes met mine. In that moment, he knew. He knew I was the one who had brought his world crashing down. I should have felt happy. Instead, I just felt tired. Agent Santos called me that afternoon. "Mr. Miller, we've arrested Wilson and 2 other executives. We've also seized all company computers and financial records. What happens now? Now we build the case. But I wanted you to know, what you found was even bigger than we thought. This conspiracy goes back 5 years and involves at least 37 employees who were cheated out of their benefits. 37 people, 37 families who had their futures stolen. The news hit the local papers the next day. Federal agents arrest Crestwood executives in pension fraud scheme. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone at work knew I was involved somehow. Some people avoided me. Others came by to shake my hand and say thank you. Tom Rodriguez, a mechanic who had been let go 6 months before his pension kicked in, actually started crying when he heard the news. "They told me my start date was wrong too," he said. "I thought I was going crazy." That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person who had been cheated, every family who had their security stolen, every worker who had been thrown away after years of loyalty. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in David Chen's office when he got the call we'd been waiting for. "The grand jury returned indictments," he said, hanging up the phone. "Wilson is facing wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy charges. Maximum sentence is 70 years. 70 years. The man was 35 years old. If convicted, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. What about the other executives? Similar charges. The HR director who helped change the records is looking at 20 years. The corporate finance officer who approved the scheme could get 30. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt something I wasn't expecting. sadness. These were people's lives we were talking about. Yes, they had committed crimes. Yes, they had stolen from hard-working employees. But they were still human beings with families and futures. "David," I said, "what if they want to make a deal? What if they agree to give everyone their money back?" David looked at me like I was crazy. "Jones, they tried to steal your pension. Wilson personally orchestrated a scheme that cheated dozens of people out of millions of dollars. And you're worried about his future." "I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about doing the right thing." That evening, Sarah and I were sitting on our porch again, watching another sunset. I told her about my conversation with David. "You're a good man, Jones Miller," she said. "Too good for this world sometimes. What would you do?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I'd want justice, but I'd also want it to be over. We're 60 years old, honey. How much time do we want to spend in courtrooms and lawyers' offices?" She was right, as usual. The next morning, Agent Santos called with an update. "Crestwood's insurance company wants to settle. They're offering full pension restoration for all affected employees, plus damages for the fraud." "How much are we talking about?" "For you personally. Your full pension, retroactive to when it should have started, plus $200,000 in compensation." $200,000. More money than I had ever seen at one time. "What about the criminal charges?" "That's separate. Wilson and his people will still face trial, but this settlement means you won't have to testify if you don't want to." I thought about Wilson sitting in his jail cell, waiting for trial. I thought about his family, his young kids, who probably didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. Then I thought about Tom Rodriguez crying in my office, about all the other families who had been cheated, about the sleepless nights Sarah and I had spent worrying about our future. "I'll testify," I said. "Those people need to know what they did was wrong." The trial took place 6 months later. I had never been in a federal courtroom before. It was intimidating. High ceilings, dark wood everywhere, serious-faced people in expensive suits. Wilson looked different, thinner, older. His confident smile was completely gone. When it was my turn to testify, the prosecutor asked me to tell the jury about my 29 years at Crestwood, about the nights I stayed late, the emergencies I handled, the loyalty I had shown. Then she asked me to describe how it felt when Wilson told me I was being fired. "It felt like my whole life had been erased," I said, looking directly at Wilson. "Like 29 years of hard work meant nothing, like I was disposable." Wilson wouldn't meet my eyes. The prosecutor showed the jury the emails we had found. Wilson's messages about handling the Miller situation, the calculations about how much money they would save by cheating me. "Mr. Miller," the prosecutor said, "in your opinion, did Mr. Wilson know exactly what he was doing when he changed your employment records?" "Yes," I said. "He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew it was wrong. The defense lawyer tried to make it seem like Wilson was just following orders from corporate headquarters, that he was a victim too. But the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Wilson was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. The HR director got 6 months. The corporate finance officer got 2 years. It wasn't the 70 years they could have received, but it was justice. After the sentencing, I was walking out of the courthouse when someone called my name. "Mr. Miller?" I turned around. It was Wilson's wife. She was a small woman, maybe 40, with tired eyes and worry lines around her mouth. She was holding a little girl's hand, Wilson's daughter. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly, "for what Marcus did. To you and all the other families." I didn't know what to say. Here was this woman, whose life had been destroyed by her husband's crimes, apologizing to me. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know. But I wanted you to know that not everyone in our family is like him. And I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For stopping him. If you hadn't spoken up, He would have kept doing this to other people. You saved other families from going through what you went through. I looked down at the little girl, who was staring up at me with curious eyes. She was maybe 6 years old, the same age as my youngest granddaughter. "What's your name, sweetheart?" I asked her. "Emma," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name. You take care of your mum, okay?" She nodded solemnly. As they walked away, I realized something important. This wasn't really about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about making sure the right thing happened, even when it was hard. A year later, I was in my garage, building a bookshelf for Sarah's collection of romance novels. Working with my hands again, creating something useful and beautiful, felt good after all those months of lawyers and courtrooms. The money from the settlement had secured our retirement. We were comfortable, finally. But more importantly, the case had led to changes at companies across the country. New laws protecting employee benefits, stricter oversight of pension programs. Crestwood Technologies had been sold to a larger company. The new owners cleaned house, bringing in ethical management and implementing strong protections for older employees. Tom Rodriguez was hired back at full pension. So were most of the other workers who had been cheated. As I sanded the wood for Sarah's bookshelf, I thought about something Agent Santos had told me after the trial. "Mr. Miller, do you know what the most important thing you did was? It wasn't finding those emails. It wasn't testifying at trial. It was refusing to just accept what happened to you." She was right. For 29 years, I had kept my head down, followed the rules, trusted that if I worked hard and stayed loyal, the company would take care of me. But sometimes the system fails. Sometimes the people in charge are corrupt or greedy or just plain mean. And when that happens, good people have to stand up and fight back. Not because it's easy, not because it's fun, but because it's right. The bookshelf was coming together nicely. Sarah would love it. As I worked, I could hear her in the kitchen, humming while she made dinner. After all these years, after everything we'd been through, we were still here, still together, still building a life. That evening, as we sat on our porch watching another sunset, Sarah asked me something I'd been thinking about a lot. "Do you regret it? All the stress, the trial, the months of worry?" I thought about Wilson in his prison cell, about his wife and daughter trying to rebuild their lives, about Tom Rodriguez, back at work with his pension secure, about all the future employees who would be protected because we had spoken up. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it at all." "Why not?" "Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be pushed around. Even when you're scared. Even when it's easier to just walk away." Sarah smiled and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Jones Miller." "I'm proud of us," I said. "We did this together." As the sun set on another day, I realized something important. Wilson had tried to steal my future, but he had actually given me something more valuable than money. He had reminded me that I was worth fighting for, and that sometimes, when you stand up for yourself, you end up standing up for everyone. The bookshelf was finished the next day. It was strong, well built, made to last, just like the lesson I had learned. Your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you. It's determined by what you're willing to do to protect it. And sometimes, protecting yourself means protecting everyone else too. That's a lesson worth learning, no matter how old you are. 6 months later, Wilson was released from prison and now works at a small non-profit, helping other former inmates find employment. He has never spoken publicly about the case, but those close to him say he is a changed man. Crestwood Technologies continues to operate under new management, with some of the strongest employee protection policies in the industry. And Jones Miller? He's still building furniture in his garage, still watching sunsets with Sarah, and still inspiring others to stand up for what's right.